Welcome to the Health Coach Nation podcast. My name is Hailey Rowe, and I'm a sales and marketing coach and LinkedIn lead generation service provider. I work with health, life, and mindset coaches and online service-based business owners to help them get more sales, shift their time to the client-generating activities instead of just the busy work, and overcome that social media overwhelm. Let's get into the show. Exciting news. Until July 17th, we are running a Health Coach Nation podcast sweepstakes. So what that means is you can share a screenshot of your favorite Health Coach Nation episode or something you love about the show. You could either share that direct to camera or a screenshot of one of the episodes and tag me on Instagram at Hailey, Hailey, _ROWE, Rowe. And when you tag me on Instagram and share one of your favorite podcasts or things from the podcast to your stories or as a post, you will be entered to win 1 month of free access to my Work Smart Marketing Club membership, which basically takes you through things like local marketing, partnership marketing, content marketing, all of the things when it comes to marketing that you're scratching your head about. You'll be able to get efficient ways to put your business out there, grow your audience, grow your visibility, and get live coaching with me twice a month on small group membership calls. All right, so I cannot wait to announce the winner around July 17th. Be sure to enter and tag me on Instagram, and I'll talk to you soon.
My name is Katie Strickland. I'm a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, and I just graduated from working with Hailey Rowe. And I just wanted to say that joining her program was really one of the best investments that I have made in my business in a very long time. I was struggling. I didn't know what I should be doing for marketing. I really wasn't doing much at all. I was like a deer in headlights. I had no idea where to turn. When I graduated, I thought that building a website and just putting it out there was going to be enough to bring clients in my door, and I was wrong. So working with Hailey really opened up my eyes to all of the different things that I could be doing for marketing. I had no idea there were so many options, and she really helped me to figure out what it is that was a good fit for me to be working on, that felt comfortable and that was going to bring me results. So Hailey taught me how to kind of grow my Instagram, what I should be doing on Facebook. She helped me with my LinkedIn page, and she really helped me to build my confidence in doing discovery calls and taught me how to convert potential clients actually into clients. I think anything that you're looking for with business and marketing, Hailey probably has in her program. It was a very, very comprehensive program. There was a lot of information. And I also love that she has a private Facebook group where she was easy to access. I always felt like Hailey was right on top of getting back to me. She always had the answers for me, and her group coaching calls were really great. And having the access to those twice a week was really helpful because not everybody has coaching calls so frequently. And if I couldn't join one, I usually was able to join another one. So I never felt like I was missing out on the opportunity to work with Hailey. So we were able to get a lot done in a short period of time. So my favorite thing about working with Hailey, I think, was just that she was always there to listen to me, and she always had the answers to really just kind of help me get out of my own way and to help me put myself out there and to do things that were really outside of my comfort zone. I felt like she was my biggest cheerleader, and she really helped me to grow my business and to make more than my investment with her back in a short amount of time. So if you're on the fence about working with a marketing coach, not sure if it's right for you or if she's right for you, I definitely highly recommend Hailey, and I think it was a great investment.
Expert who teaches individuals how to bring their innate charisma to the surface. His journey began with a passion for helping people express themselves more confidently, and his background in psychology and communication techniques has allowed him to become a sought-after speaker, a mentor, a coach, and he loves empowering people to be more magnetic and effective in their interactions. And he also hosts a podcast that I got to be on called The Persistence Playbook. So he is also very big on helping people with their grit and their persistence and all that good stuff. So thank you for being here, Brett. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, Hailey, thank you for having me on the show. Super excited to chat with you and hopefully deliver a valuable conversation to your audience.
Yeah, so one of the things that I see a lot with new entrepreneurs and coaches is that they get in their head a lot about, I don't know how this interaction with this person or how this discovery call or how, marketing myself is going to work. And I don't know if I'm going to get gains from it. And so therefore they let that fear of the unknown and that uncertainty kind of leak into their communication or, let it kind of allow them to not be consistent or things like that, just because there's so much unknown and they're so freaked out. And usually when we're freaked out, we don't do great work. So what would you say to somebody who's feeling a lot of uncertainty and kind of letting that derail them or, make them not do the things they need to be doing in their business? Any advice for that?
Yeah, so I think there's certainly, a couple solutions to that problem. And I would just start by saying every entrepreneur feels that. Even the entrepreneurs that you see on Instagram that are killing it and they're driving crazy revenue on a quarterly and a yearly basis, they're still feeling unsure of themselves. They're not exactly sure what to do next. We're all kind of figuring this thing out on the fly. And I think it's helpful, honestly, just to remind myself of that, is that everyone's kind of winging it here and figuring it as they go. But the people that take the most action are the people that are going to figure things out quicker in the long run. So I would say just, one thing just to consistently remind yourself of is that no one's got all the answers and that everyone out here is kind of faking it till we make it to some degree. And we're all winging it a little bit. But the people that get those failures out of the way quicker, the people that are more okay with failing today so they can succeed tomorrow are the ones that are going to quicker get to their goals.
Totally agree. Yes. And what about when it comes to communicating and starting to build relationships in our business? Do you have any advice for how does someone start that? How does somebody bring their charisma and, plan that communication?
Yeah. So I think that, of course, in any business you're in is going to be a relationship business, whether you're a coach or whether you're a real estate agent or whether you're a professional speaker or maybe you run a laundromat. To an extent, there are going to be relationships in that business that are important to you driving revenue and having a productive business. So I would say, one thing is whenever you're dealing with people, it's so important to be there in the moment. And I think people really feel this. So if you're with a customer or you're with a business partner, you're with someone that maybe could send you a referral down the line, whoever it is, if you're face to face with someone, whether it be in person or on Zoom, so important just to be present and really be interacting with them and only them in that moment. And when they're talking, really listen. Try and visualize what they're saying in your own head. Don't get caught up in your own thoughts. Try not to think about, that Instagram post that is about to go live. Try not to prepare what you're going to say next so early within their statement. Just be present with them. And this is something that people so rarely get in their day. True presence, great listening, that if they do get it from you, it's going to feel like sunlight on their skin. I mean, it's a feeling that they're not accustomed to, but they're going to love being around you. They're going to trust you and they're going to want to do business with you. So I'd say just the first pillar of just human interaction, building great relationships, being an effective communicator, it's all about presence, being there in that moment, truly listening to what the person has to say. So then you can respond in a relevant fashion.
Yes, I love that. And another thing that I talk about a lot with clients is always focusing on the other person, focusing on what is in it for them and not you, and being centered around, serving and being helpful and that kind of thing. And I think a lot of people, feel worry in their head or are thinking about what's in it for me, and they let that kind of degrade their presence. So any tips for how does somebody, what are maybe some examples where people could get out of that nervousness or thinking about themselves or having that train of thought get in the way of their active listening.
Sure, yeah, and I think you really hit the nail right on the head, right? If we just go into every interaction with a mindset of service, for serving the other person with their best interests and need, how can I help this person accomplish their goals faster? If that is our mindset in every interaction within business, then we're going to go so much farther, so much faster. But it is kind of tough to get into that mindset. It's almost not a natural thing. We've all kind of got a bit of an egotistical, selfish tendency that we tend to fall into here and then. How am I going to make this sale for me? How am I going to make my rent payment? How am I going to hit that revenue number that I'm trying to hit this quarter? But I just think that similar to meditation, right? When you're meditating, your mind will wander and then you'll bring it back to the breath. You just kind of have to be mindful of these things. You've got to be mindful of what the mind is chattering to you before you go into a client interaction. And if your mind is only focused on what you're going to get out of this, then they're going to feel that. And the goal of this scenario has to be, how can I help them? And the truth of the matter is, your revenue, your income is going to be directly tied to the level and amount of service that you're able to bring the marketplace. So that's what I always remind myself. When I start to get a little selfish in my mindset, I'm only thinking about myself. What can I get out of this interaction? I remind myself that at the end of the day, my revenue is directly tied to the amount of service and the quality of service that I bring to the marketplace. And I think it's just a habit. It's just talking to yourself. It's a verbal interaction with yourself before you get on a client call, before you meet a client in person, whatever it is. And you just remind yourself, I'm here to serve. And whatever comes of it, comes of it. I can't control this outcome. What I can control is my intent. And my intent in this specific interaction is to serve this person the best I possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to marketing online and being able to stand out, I would love to know, what are some charisma maybe do's and don'ts when it comes to marketing yourself, standing out, and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I think that when we talk about charisma, for me, I always like to kind of break it down into three pillars, right? When we see a charismatic person, to me, they kind of embody these traits actively. So power, that person has to display power. You've kind of got to believe that this person can move mountains if they needed to. They're a powerful person who can affect their environment. And then the second part of that equation, which we've touched on already, is presence. Not only are they powerful, but they're also present in this moment. They're not thinking about tomorrow. They're not thinking about yesterday. They're standing in that moment. Wherever their 2 feet are, their brain is as well. They're present. And then the third pillar, which is just as important as the first two, is warmth. You've got to have that power. You've got to have that presence, but then you've also got to have warmth. People need to believe that you have their best interests in mind and that you're going to use this power and this presence for good, not evil. So I'd say that we need to work on skills within those three categories. And I think there's little micro skills that kind of make up power, that make up presence, that make up warmth. But I'd say if I could just give you just one little micro skill to appear more charismatic, perhaps in a camera-facing video that you might be posting as a marketing collateral or a social media post, I would say one little thing that you can do is to speak a little bit slower. I think a lot of people speak way too fast. Speak just a little bit slower, not too slow, because it's still a social media age and we're going to lose people if we speak too slow. But slow things down 5% and insert the occasional pause. If you can insert the occasional pause in your speech, it shows power. It shows presence. It shows that you're confident enough in your speech that people aren't going to leave because you paused a little bit. So slow your speech down a little bit. Pause here and there. You're going to convey a lot more power and a lot more charisma with your communication.
Yes, I love that. There are certain people who I listen to their podcasts or I listen to their content, and it's like every word they say is like dripping with like, this is the most important thing you need to hear in the entire world. And they do such a great job with the inflections and like the pausing and all of that.
Sure.
And, when I play back, like if I were to read what they were saying on a page, I'd be like, oh, like, that's not that cool. Like, that's not that interesting. I already knew that. But then when they say it, it's like, whoa, this is groundbreaking.
Yeah, it shakes you to the soul. It's all about delivery, right? It really is. A lot of this information that we hear online is certainly not new. It's been regurgitated, for the last 100 years. A lot of stuff you see in content today are just kind of rehashed ideas from Think and Grow Rich, which came out about 100 years ago, right? So, but I think the way that we deliver it is going to ultimately affect the way that impacts people. So I think another thing you could do is just downward inflection. So important at the end of statements. If you're ending your statements like this, people aren't really going to be affected by it. They're not going to think you're sure of your expertise, and they're probably not going to take action on your idea. But if you're consistently driving your statements home with downward inflection, you sound sure of your idea, and people are much more apt to follow somebody who's sure of their statements.
That's awesome. Yeah. So one of the other things that you talk about is how to help people express themselves more confidently. And I think a lot of people feel like they're finding their voice online, and they're, kind of unsure of how to communicate what they're trying to say to their audience. So any advice for how does somebody get more clear on like what they want to communicate or how they want to communicate or their voice online for their brand, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I say as far as just becoming clear on your message, whether it's a piece of marketing, a piece of content, I do find, especially with video, in the early going, when you get comfortable with your voice, as far as putting it out on the internet, I think it does help to script out whatever you'd like to say. And maybe you don't stick to it word for word, but you've got it off to the side. At least you know what your first hook is going to be. You know what those first 5 to 10 words are going to be. Because I think a lot of the time for people who aren't necessarily comfortable expressing their voice, expressing their charisma in a public forum, I think having a script handy to refer to, whether it's a full script or just some bullet points, can kind of get them comfortable enough to at least get them off the sidelines and into the game. So I'd say one thing is I do think with short form video, I think scripting can be very effective and very efficient to producing videos that will eventually produce results for you. And then as far as just speaking confidently on video and as pertains to content, I think that kind of like we talked about before, inserting some pauses, speaking a little bit more slowly, adding some downward inflection to the end of your statement is all going to help. I think just inserting storytelling, telling the occasional story within your content can be much more effective than just spitting facts at them. Instead of just saying, here are 3 ways to be a more confident communicator, put a story in there that kind of tells them why this works. Like insert some storytelling into your content. People are going to get hooked much more greatly if you insert some storytelling around the facts. And then the final thing I would say is, try and project warmth with your comment, with your content. Smile. It's important to smile. Even by just turning the corners of your mouth ever so slightly upward, your voice immediately sounds more warm. And people are just going to accept you and your content on a totally different level. So I'd say, try smiling a little bit more in your content. Look like you're having fun. People are going to have more fun watching you in that case as well.
Nice. Yes. And I would love to know, for those of us who struggle with worry about what others think of us, or, imposter syndrome kicking in, or who am I to share this message? Any advice for those kinds of worries or fears?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's something that we've all gone through. I've gone through it. I certainly still go through it, right? Before I hop in these shows. Occasionally you'll get that negative thought like, who am I to hop on this podcast and teach people to communicate confidently? And I think, one is you just kind of have to make peace with that voice. It's not going away. It's just part of the human experience. We're always going to have a little bit of negative self-talk, a little bit of negative chatter in the back of our head that tells us that maybe we shouldn't be here. And maybe we're not good enough to be teaching this topic that we are, whatever it is. And make peace with that. Know it's not going away. And there is some science to the fact that it takes 2 or 3 positive affirmations to counteract negative self-talk. So I think whenever we hear that voice in our head that says, you really shouldn't be doing this. Like, you're not good enough to be teaching this topic. There's other people out there that are better than you at what you're doing right now. Notice that self-chatter. Don't ignore it. Notice it and then counteract it. And don't just counteract it with, I am the best. I can do this. I think that's, I do think that affirmations like that can be helpful as well. But instead of just doing that, remind yourself of a time where you actually did the thing that you're about to do. Like, remind yourself of a great speech that you gave in the past if you're about to give a speech and you're nervous about it. Like, if you're about to go on a podcast and you're nervous about it, you've got some negative self-chatter, remind yourself of a time when you went on a podcast and you killed it. And if we look towards our past, our resume, and we look for evidence, it's almost always there. And if we find that tangible, that real evidence, it gives us that authentic confidence to step into that situation.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess as somebody who, has been in business for a while, and I think you and I both agree that as you grow in business, it's not that all your fears and worries go away.
Hell no.
It's just that they have less of a hold on you. They, you have more confidence within yourself and how you respond to those thoughts and things like that. So I'd love to know, like, where you are now, what are some of the common worries that come up in your business, and how do you manage those? How do you, coach yourself through those?
Yeah, so I think I'm starting a new arm of my business, which is keynote speaking. So I think whenever you are starting something new, there's a lot of self-doubt and just a lot of confusion and ambiguity as to what steps should I actually be taking, and then I launch courses as well. I've got a course called Charisma 25 that we went live with recently that kind of helps people to become more charismatic over the course of 25 days. And then of course I've got a podcast, Persistence Playbook, that's been going for 2 years now, and just starting that, there was a ton of anxiety around that as well. So I'd say between podcasting and launching courses and coaching and now kind of starting a keynote speaking arm to the business, there's always just a lot of self-doubt and ambiguity that goes along with starting any of those things. Now, I will say one thing that's always helped me is finding a mentor, speaking to people that have already done what I'm about to do. I know one thing that's on my to-do list this week is to reach out to some professional speakers, pick their mind a little bit. I've actually got a call right after this to speak with a very successful keynote speaker, and just kind of talk to him about, how'd you do it? How'd you book your first few gigs? What's your fee negotiation look like? Things like that. So I'd say whenever we're feeling that kind of like we're lost in the woods feeling, which I think we've all felt as entrepreneurs, there are always people that are 1 or 2 steps ahead of you that are going to be so happy to square off 10 or 15 minutes and help you out. Because I think as people, that's just kind of an innate thing that we've got going for us, at least most of us, is that we want to help people that are a little bit behind us. We do. I think it's a beautiful thing about human nature. And I think so many of us don't lean into that enough. We don't ask for the help when it is there. So I'd say whatever you're feeling, that lost feeling about, you don't know what step to take next, you don't know how to get started in this specific avenue, reach out to someone that's 1 or 2 steps ahead of you. Ask them if they can spare 15 minutes on a Zoom call. And I guarantee 7 out of 10 times they're going to be happy to help you out and kind of give you a little bit of guidance.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess one of the things when we're talking about this and having Zoom calls with people is you have to be a good communicator to be able to get your questions out and that kind of thing. So I'm curious, what are some communication, maybe things that people miss when it comes to communicating in business, either with their potential clients or their clients, like maybe missed communication things that we should be aware of and avoid?
Yeah, I'd say, and it's kind of like it's the topic within communication that would probably sell the least books, and it's the topic within communication that would probably fill the least amount of seats at a seminar, but it's probably the most important thing about being an effective communicator, and it's being a great listener. And I think so many people really just struggle to be a great listener. Like they're in front of the person and they're nodding their head the way that they're supposed to, but they're actually not listening. They're thinking about what they're going to say next with 60% of their mental bandwidth. And maybe they're allotting 30% to actually listening. There's another 10% that's thinking about what they're going to post on LinkedIn tomorrow. So I think that just being a great listener will just set you so far ahead of the pack as a communicator that it's by far the most important tool that we should focus on from day one. It's also the tool that most people struggle with. And I think, a few ways that we can become better listeners is, one, I think the number one cardinal rule of being a great listener is never interrupt people. Let them finish their statement. Let them land the plane. take a half second to kind of digest what they said and then respond, because people are so used to being stepped on all day mid-sentence, or they're used to being cut off. And a lot of times people, they don't have bad intentions when they cut you off. They just think of something relevant to say and they want to say it. They're like an excited puppy. They want to get their voice heard immediately. But even if you're congratulating someone, like let's say they're telling you about this award they received, and you hop in mid-sentence, interrupt them, and you're like, oh my God, that's amazing, that reminds me of something that I did back in my childhood. Even if you have the best intentions, people are still going to be a little bit annoyed that you interrupted them, because people want to finish their sentence. They want to land their statement fully. So I think if we can just stop interrupting, let people finish their statement fully, really try and engross ourselves in listening to that message. Once they finish, pause for a half second. Let your face react first. If it makes you happy, smile. If it makes you concerned, wrinkle your brow. If it makes you sad, frown a little bit. And then once your face has reacted, at that point, let's respond verbally. So I think pause, let your face react, and then respond. It'll make you a better listener. Not only that, it'll make your responses so much more relevant and charismatic, because you actually fully listened to the message before formulating what you're going to say next.
Yes. And I hear from a lot of coaches, oh, I'm worried someone's going to say something that I don't know the answer to, or I don't know what to say in response to. Like, I was talking to a client who was going to maybe speak at an event, and it was her first thing, and she was worried, like, I don't know the questions they're going to ask, and so I don't know what if I don't know the answer off the bat on a question they ask. I give her my own thoughts on that, but I'd love to know your thoughts on that when someone's worried, like, okay, I'm active listening, but I have no I have no idea what to say to this person. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. It really is, right? Because sometimes you feel like you need that prep time while that other person is speaking. You're like, okay, like they're going to land their statement here in the next 15 seconds. I better start thinking about what I'm going to say next. But I think if you do that, then you lose track of what they're saying, and that statement that you eventually do come up with is just not going to hit home as hard. It's not going to be as relevant. So, what I would say to that person is, it's okay to pause and actually think about what you're going to say next. And a lot of times people will appreciate that. If you ask them a question and then that person pauses, maybe even for longer than half a second, maybe they pause for like 2 seconds, something like that, you'll be surprised at how powerful a machine your brain is. If you just give it a second or two to formulate a response, almost every time, it's going to give you something. It's going to give you something relevant to say, something interesting to say that pertains to the question that was just asked to you. So I would just tell that person, don't be afraid of the pause. A pause can be so powerful when listening. It can be powerful when speaking. It kind of reminds me of a quote by a really famous piano player called Arthur Scannable. And he said, "The notes I play no better than any pianist. It's the pauses between the notes. Therein lies the art." And I think that's so true with listening. It's so true with speaking. And I think in this situation, I would just say, don't be afraid to pause for a second or two. Let your mind catch up, and your mind will give you something to say. Trust the brain to give you that answer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we also need to grant ourselves permission to not know the answer to everything. It's not your job to know the answer to every single thing.
That's a really good point.
I think that part of being a good coach or expert is saying when, that's a really good question. I think it's a nuanced answer. I don't know the exact answer for you right this second, but what I do know, and you can either coach or you can either, research it and come back with your thoughts or whatever. But I think 2 things. 1, you probably will think of something if you pause, like you said. And 2, it's okay if you don't know the answer. Why do we have this expectation that you need to have every single answer right off the top of your head?
It's a really good point. I like that a lot. And I think people will ultimately respect you more as a professional and an advisor if once in a while you're honest with them and you tell them, I don't know, because honestly, no human knows all the answers. Even like the greatest expert of all time within their niche, they don't know everything. So I think that your clients will honestly respect and trust you more if occasionally you tell them, you know what? I don't really know the answer to that question, but I'm going to do a little research and I'm going to find that answer and I'm going to get back to you. Ultimately, I think that's going to lead towards better trust with your clients.
Yeah. So, Brett, where can everybody find you, learn more about charisma and grit and persistence and all the things that you teach online?
Yeah, so I'd say, first place to look is Persistence Playbook. That is my podcast, and we fire off one episode every Tuesday where we're interviewing high performers, and we're really just trying to drill into, how do these people fight through daily resistance, self-doubt, and laziness to continue taking the massive action towards their goals. Because it's my belief that most of us know what we should be doing. We just struggle to keep our motivation high enough and our self-belief high enough on a daily basis to actually keep taking the action necessary. So Persistence Playbook, the best place to find me. And besides that, at the Brett McDermott on Instagram, where we're firing off some content on a regular basis there that centers around the art of grit as well as the art of charisma. Because as far as I'm concerned, if you've got grit, you've got persistence, and then you've got the people skills and the charisma to back it up, I think you can do anything in this world. To me, that is my personal formula for superpower. And it's been a lot of fun. Hailey, thank you so much for having me on the show. This has been a blast.
Yeah, thank you for being here. It's been a blast. It's gone by fast. And
oh wow, are we rapping right now? Do you want me to drop a bar?
We're gonna do a little rap at the end. Your turn. No, just kidding. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to this podcast. And if it's really helpful for you, I'd really appreciate if you share it and or leave a written podcast review. This tells the podcast sites that our show is useful and it will be promoted to more people that way. Thanks again.